respect to the period to which particular goods remain in the warehouse, including the particular relating to dispatch, movement, receipt, and disposal of such goods, and store the goods in such manner that can be identified item-wise, owner-wise, and shall facilitate any physical verification or inspection by proper officer on demand. So as you are saying that even an unregistered person has to maintain, basically he has to maintain in relation to the goods, about the goods which have been stored there, which are in movement. In case of owner and owner of the warehouse or godown, basically it is called GTMO. Now coming to works contract, the earlier which we have discussed, they have to maintain that account. Apart from that, they have to also maintain additional record. Additional record they have specified for two type of person, that is works contract and for an agent. For a works contract, they are saying that whatever the service he is providing, in relation to, they have to maintain the detail. Plus, as we know, works contract is a composite supply in which both goods and service are involved. So they are saying in relation to goods also you have to maintain full detail, and it's better to maintain project-wise detail so that you can find out where the ITC is available, where not. So keeping in line with that, they have given additional details to be maintained by works contract. That is about the name and address of the person on whom behalf works contract is executed, description, value, and quantity of goods or service received or utilized for execution of works contract, detail of payment received in respect of each works contract, name and address of supplier from whom he has received goods or services. In a similar fashion, they have also given for agent. As we know, agent works on behalf of principal. So he has to keep a record of whatever the goods he has received from the principal and he has supplied on behalf of principal. Proper account is to be maintained of the transactions which are done on behalf of principal. So as we discuss what the books and account, so that books and accounts which are we are maintaining, we have to cap it for the 5 years. Obviously, if any litigation is going on, you have to maintain till the litigation is sorted out. So this is the part which relates to the accounts and record, which is required to be maintained under GST. Now we are going, sir, you want to add something in that?
No, please continue.
Okay, with the accounts and record, let us come as to the various documents which have been prescribed under GST for the purpose of keeping the records are. We have divided our types of record which is prescribed under GST into 3 parts: outward, inward, and others. As we know, for outward supply, we have to raise tax invoice, export invoice, revised tax invoice, receipt voucher, refund voucher, consolidated invoice, supplementary invoice, bill of supply. When we come to inward supply, our main focus is on RCM, because in inward supply, none of this document is applicable. In case of only RCM, you have to maintain self-tax invoice and payment voucher. Other is ISD. Obviously, who has ISD unit, at the time of distribution, they have to raise ISD invoice. So these are the types which we have to maintain. Now you would be saying this all we know, tax invoice, export invoice, what we have to raise, what we have to specify. But when we were checking for the clients, we find out few discrepancy, which when we will discuss, you will understand why we have taken this topic and what the significance of it. Now, starting with outward supply, first part is tax invoice. No, we all know whenever we are supplying taxable goods, we are liable to raise tax invoice. And more or less everybody would be knowing when the tax invoice is to be raised. They have given for goods or service 2 different provisions. For goods, you have to raise the invoice before or at the time of removal of goods. For service, you can raise it before or at the time of provision of service. Obviously, in service, they have given 30-day extended time. So you have, even after the provision of service, you have 30-day time limit to raise the tax invoice. Now, tax invoice, by way of rule, they have also prescribed what are contain needed to be there. So when they say contain, they say there should be name, address, and GST of supplier or recipient. Obviously, tax invoice should have serial number, unique identification number, means it should be a number should be allotted to it. Date of issue should be mentioned on it. In the invoice, you should also specify the Hsn code of the goods or service and even the description of goods or services provided. Then will be your invoice value, your taxable value. If any discount and abatement you have given on that value, that also need to be included with rate of tax, tax amount, and quantity in case of goods. Then place of supply. Though they have specified, place of supply is mandatory to be given in case of interstate trade or commerce. Then address of delivery, it is to be given only when there is difference between place of supply. You have to also specify in your invoice whether the tax is payable under reverse charge mechanism or not, and it should be signed. Now, as you will see, these are all the basic requirements. It seems that more or less we would be complying, but the consequences are high, like which are highlighted in red. There are cases where we are giving Hsn code and description of goods, and both are not matching. Now, what is happening? Due to that, your e-way bill issue arises. Maybe it may be blocked by the e-way bill officer saying that your Hsn code and description not matching. They will obviously detain the truck, detain the goods, and ask you to pay the tax, ask you to pay the penalty, which is equal to 200% of the tax amount. So you need to be very careful what Hsn code you are specifying in the invoice and the description you are giving. There are numbers of instances come where due to this discrepancy, goods have been detained. Even there are cases where description and Hsn code may relate to different rate. Obviously, we all know officers being revenue collector, they will look for where they can collect higher rate. So based on the Hsn or description, whichever is giving them higher rate, they will go for it and will ask you to pay the tax for the same. Then coming to a place of supply. Place of supply is very important. Though it is said that it should be mentioned, mandatory required to be mentioned in case of interstate supply, but we will request you to write in all the invoices, tax invoice. Reason being, place of supply helps you to determine the type of tax, whether it will be interstate or CGST, SGST. Because due to difference of tax, you are also liable to pay the tax. As you know, if you have paid C and S instead of IGST, it's not the case. You can't say that it's a revenue neutral. So it's okay. Even what I have paid under CGST and SGST, equal amount I have to pay under IGST. There's no loss to the government. But the problem is that they have specifically given a separate section under GST, whereby they are saying if that mistake has occurred, you pay the IGST again and claim refund on CGST and SGST. They are not allowing you to set off. They are asking you to pay and claim the refund, though they are not charging interest on the same. But this is an unnecessary hassle to go through the department. So it's very important. You should be careful what the place of supply you are mentioning, so that your type of tax is correctly fitted in the tax invoice. Second, it is also important for your e-way bill, because it's happened sometime what the place of supply we mentioned, delivery address may be different. For e-way bill, your validity is very important. So you need to be very careful that these things are specified and they are in link with what you intended to do, means where the goods is intended to be delivered. Next thing is whether tax is payable on reverse charge. This on maximum tax invoice, it is not mentioned. It does not matter whether your supply is covered under RCM or not. You have to specifically mention this line. If it is not under RCM, you have to say no. If it is under RCM, you have to say yes. And it is mandatory required to mention over it. But most of the people not mentioning it. And there is also instance where the tax is covered under RCM, where that transaction is covered under RCM, they are not mentioning about the tax amount. See, this thing is to be mentioned irrespective of the fact whether it is under RCM or not. So it's very important you write tax amount even though your transaction is covered under RCM. But most of the SSCs are missing it. So as of this is for tax invoice, you need to be very much careful. Why? Because of this, when you are doing your GSTR1, when you are fitting your detail in GSTR1, while fitting in the detail, while filing the GSTR1, if error occur in any of this, there will be issue at the end of the recipient. Suppose whether your supply was not covered under RCM, by mistake you said yes, you filed GSTR1 with yes. As a result, it will be reflecting to your counterparty, showing reverse charge as yes. Though he is not liable to pay under RCM, but to him in GSTR 2A and 2B, it will be showing as RCM yes. Because of which the audit department, when they will be seeing your counterparty, they will straight away say you that you discharge RCM on this. It does not matter to me. As your supplier has filed that it is under RCM, you have to pay for it. You keep on fighting. That's a different thing. Obviously, you will give your stand, you will furnish a declaration from your supplier that, yeah, this is under forward charge, we have paid. But initially, at first step, the audit officer will not listen to you. He will give you an audit observation saying that as your GSTR2, in your GSTR2A, this transaction is showing, you are liable to pay under RCM until and unless you are able to substantiate it properly with the documents.
Ashika, so before we go to the export invoice, I want to explain the invoice once again with one sample format. So let me share the screen. Is my voice audible? Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
All right. All right. So participants, is the screen visible to you? If yes, please put it in the chat as yes. Pretty good. I get 2, 3 couple of yes. And by the way, whenever I do sessions in the online, there's no way I can actually catch your attention. More importantly, I don't know when there are technology breakdowns happens, etc. So in between, I keep asking questions so that I don't sleep and you don't sleep off. All right. Saturday afternoon, and I had good meals. And that too with a boring subject and documentation, right? Okay. Now this is the invoice which is there in front of you. Technically, there's no great deal, no rocket science. This is the invoice which we have been seeing from the era when there was no taxation, then sales tax, then VAT, then excess service tax, and GST, right? If I have to talk to a businessman when GST has come in, what is that he should know or what are the changes? He would say, what's new in GST? Earlier I was putting VAT 14.5%. Now I have to put CGST 9%, SGST 9%. Earlier I was doing CST 2% or whatever. Now I'll be putting IGST 18%. That's all. So what is a big deal in GST? I really don't know. That's the kind of experience of a businessman. And when someone makes those statements, I'll be very happy that, okay, at least they're confident that, okay, it is not a scary subject. It's just that when we go to the department attending the show cause notices and various aspects, that's when we realize that there's lots where people have to learn about GST. However, today's chapter is nothing to do with the other aspects, but when someone is preparing invoice, GST is a self-assessment tax. Whatever you are filing, it will be taken as the deemed assessed. I'm sure you might be hearing in the news that, okay, DG Analytics and Risk Management Wing has prepared listed out some GSTNs for audit, right? So everyone says, and around 35,000 in GSTs have been selected for the audit out of 1.3 crore RSS. Now, rest be assured, if you have filed your GSTR 1, 3B, 9 and 9C, and more or less there is no hanky-panky, and more like your AAS, TIS, 26AS are matching, kind of, you should be assuming that your audit for that year is also complete. Yeah. So that is how you have to consider. That's how self-assessment. Given that it is a self-assessment, the whole of the act provisions, everything has been condensed and designed into one document which is called as returns. And when we say returns, GSTR 1, 3B, though technically 1 is not a return from the legal language, but GSTR, goods and service tax, R1, return 1, R2, return 2, etc. Yeah. Okay. So here is the invoice. Let me zoom it a little bit for you. Now, rule 46 of the CGST rules, rule 46 of the CGST rules, Central Goods and Service Tax rules, talks about tax invoice. And when it comes to the record keeping, section 35 talks about accounts and records, which is what Ashika has shown. Technically, GST Act is very simple. They said maintain your production records, inward and outward, so sales and purchase register, and if you're a trader, stock register, ITC availed, output liability. That's all. In terms of bookkeeping, only this much is expected in the law. Always the devil lies in the details. Where is the details? Other particulars as may be prescribed. And when you go to as may be prescribed, when you go to the rules, you will have huge list of rules. Tax invoice, debit note, credit note, accounts and records. These are all the rules which talk in detail. Let's look at rule 46 tax invoice. And when you see tax invoice, it has list of items, right? A to R. So R was a recent addition. So which means there are around close to around 20 items they are expecting it to be there in the invoice. Now, what are these 20 items? Why they are expecting? So there are multiple formats. Let me pick one format of invoice. Let's start with the GST law itself. When does the GST is applicable? When you are making a supply. So section 7 of the act deals with supply. Now, if you are making a supply, you got to give him some document. You got to give him some document. In case if it is taxable, it will be called as tax invoice. If it is exempt, it will be called as bill of supply. So it will be called as bill of supply, or this, indicating that there is a supply that is happening from one person to another person, right? Now, the next thing that comes is to identify who is the supplier and the recipient, identifying who is liable to pay the tax. So I got to give, he is the supplier and there is a receiver. This is the person who is receiving. Someone is selling, someone is receiving. Section 9 subsection 1, the forward charge one has to pay. 9 subsection 3 or 4 in a reverse charge, the recipient has to pay. So the document has to identify who is the seller and buyer. Obviously, we have a bill to ship to models, and of course, this is optional. The consignee details, the billing, the ship to or dispatch details are optional. When we are saying the name of the supplier, it is the trade name, legal name, but very importantly, it is GST number that has to be there. From the recipient perspective, even GST number has to be there from the recipient. So the seller's the GST number and buyer's GST number has to be there. And why am I showing the invoice format? Because your rule 46 has all the information. many people do not do an inspection of the invoice, whether they have complied with all the aspects or not. Then very important is place of supply, because when I said section 9, which talks about levy, section 9 is under CGST Act, but it is section 5 under IGST Act. How do I know whether I should refer to IGST or CGST? Is by determining the place of supply. If your place of supply, if we say your location of the supplier is equal to place of supply, then it is CGST and IGST. If location of the supplier is different from the place of supply, then it is IGST, right? So this is how the law has been formed. So they said the one has to prepare IGST or CGST basis the location of the supplier. I am here in the state of Karnataka and my GST number starts with 29. My GST number starts with 29. If my place of supply is also 29, if my place of supply is also 29, then it would be CGST as GST, else it would be IGST, right? So that is why it is very important that you determine the place of supply. However, the government was little relaxed, saying that if it is within the state, you can give the relaxation up to 50,000 rupees. Address is also not required. Within the state, only interstate place of supply is required, because the state in which the goods are getting consumed, that state will be getting revenue, because under GST, the way they have designed is the state which is spending has to get the revenue. So you got to mention the place of supply. So we have covered section 7, section 9 of the Act. Now comes, when do you issue this invoice? When do you issue this invoice? There's a particular time. Section 31 of the Act, read with section 12 and 13, have defined when are the time of supply provisions. So you got to raise the invoice within that specified time. In case of the goods, on or before movement of the goods. In case of services, within 30 days from the date of provision of the service, you shall raise the invoice. So that is why it is very important that you look at it. And government want it to be invoice to be very, you can't have duplicate for the purpose of audit. So they have said that the serial number has to be serially numbered, which means you're assuming you're starting an invoice series as 1000. So the next invoice has to be 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004. If you're saying 1000A, then it should be 1000A, 1000B, 1000C, 1000. You got to have a pattern and serially numbered. It can be started with 1000, 1 lakh, or vice versa. You can start with 9999, 9998, you come in whatever be the manner, but it got to be serially numbered. That is very important. Can I have multiple series? Permitted, but ensure each series is also serially numbered. That's very important. And the maximum one can give is 16 digits. That's what the law says. So we've now moved after 7, 9, 12, and 13 is completed. And under the IGST Act, which dealt with the place of supply. Place of supply generally mean location of the recipient. Please note, place of supply is not a blanket the location of the recipient, but majority of the times place of supply means location of recipient. However, refer to section 10, 11, 12, 13 of the IGST Act. In case of the goods within the Indian territory, it is section 10. Export of the goods is 11. In case of services within Indian territory is section 12. And one of the party, either the supplier or the recipient, is outside India, refer to section 13 in case of services, and determine the place of supply. Now, why determination of the place of supply is very important? Because the place of supply indicates which state will be getting this revenue. We have moved from the state specific to a federal. where there is a one law across India. That is why we call it as one nation, one tax. However, for the purpose of the states to operate, each state has their own budget and they get it from this. So place of supply is very important. So we have covered the section 12, 13 of the Act. Now comes is what we are determining, that we are supplying something, right? We are supplying some items. So it is mandatory when you are supplying some items, the description of the goods is mandatory, the Hsn or SSE. People still continue to call it as a SSE code, no harm. But chapter 99 of the Hsn, so Hsn 99 is the service accounting code. Erstwhile under service tax, we remember that 0044 something under the beside the challan of it where we were writing that. So this that has now become like construction 9954. So 9973 leasing finance charges, leasing support charges. So all there are different HSNs for different things. So please write that. Then quantity, what you are selling. In case of services is not required. In case of bill of supply is not required. How many quantity? Like in this example, you can see 500 quantity of what? Kgs, liters, meters, what it is. There are roughly 30, yeah, not roughly, around 30 plus, or around 31 or 33 different units of measures have been given. So very important. And what is the rate at which you are selling? So the value of your supply. This we call it as under GST. The title we give to this is taxable value or taxable supply. Levy of GST happens on this amount. We call this as taxable value. So section 15 of the Act deals with what is the value on which you will be paying GST. And the section clearly says, along with this, if you are also adding any charges, including late fee, interest, whatever you are charging, you got to record it in the invoice. And you are also permitted, not just that it is only additions, you are also permitted to have reductions. In case if you want to give a discount to the customer, issue it, but put it on the invoice. So all these are governed and guided by section 15 of the Act. And this is where very important that one has to mention the information in the invoice crystal clear that you are complying with all the provisions of the law. Then comes the other aspects, and one of which Ashika was mentioning is this tax payable on reverse charge or the forward charge. You know, under GST, we are all a honorary tax collectors. I am making an audit service to you. I raise a bill of 1 lakh plus GST 18,000 rupees. I have been privileged to collect the tax of the government from you and give it to the government. So for a businessman, the GST which is being paid to the government is technically not a cash outflow from the P&L perspective. He is just doing a courier. He is collecting it and remitting it. So that's why I say we are honorary tax collectors. However, who is the person who is paying GST? Is always end consumer. Is always end consumer. So in some situations, not that they doubt this supplier whether this guy will pay or not, to ease the compliance, they said, let the recipient pay directly to me in some cases. Now, whenever a situation like that arises, when I am making a supply, I am writing on the invoice, hey, look, I'm charging you 1 lakh. GST on it is 18,000. Hsn is 9965, let's say. And 18,000 you pay to the government directly. That has to be mentioned on the invoice. Yeah. So make sure you mention if the tax payable is on the reverse charge or not, mention it is on the invoice. Anyhow, Ashika has not come to the export invoices. In case of exports, and there is an additional thing. Then comes very important, who is the one who is issuing it? What is the authenticity of the document? Every document has to be signed by who? The authorized representative, authorized signatory, not the one who is there in the GST and certificate. Agar, if that being the case, like if the head of the organization, let's say for Reliance, Mr. Mukesh ji will be tired of signing the documents, right? So it's, or the organization can make anyone as an authorized representative to sign on behalf of the organization. In case if the document is issued digitally, digital signature is also permitted. It's not necessary that you got to issue only a physical signature, but make sure you put a signature physically or digitally. These were the various compliances with regards to rule 46. However, there was a new rule that got added, rule for R sub, in addition to with the new rule 48.4, which was talking about a quick reference code. QR code embedded with IRN should be also be included. So in the invoice which you are printing, you got to mention, you got to give a QR code. You got to give a QR code when e-invoice is applicable, and this is only, it has to be an e-invoice QR code. IRN is actually optional. Many people are actually printing, and people constantly ask this question that, do I need to print IRN? Choice is yours. Act doesn't say IRN. Act only says a QR code in which IRN is embedded, which means this QR code has to be issued by NIC. It got to be an invoice, a QR code issued by NIC. And who got to comply with this QR code? All those whose turnover is exceeding 20 crores in any of the previous 4 financial years, 17-18, 18-19, 19-20, 21-22. In any of these 4 financial years, if your turnover has exceeded 20 crores, then effective from this April, you will have to comply with the QR code. There is an IRP 1 called NIC e-invoice 1. IRP 2 is about to get launched very soon. So in any of the IRP portal, you have to issue this e-invoice. So with the QR code. So these are the basic things one has to be complying with the provisions of the law. Any doubts to anyone? So Kalyan is asking, what is the best way to mention expense to be reimbursed by the client, say for travel expense on audit? Kalyan, I would say here, in the instead of freight charges, you will say travel reimbursement, right? Now the people ask this question, if I put there GST is applicable. Of course, GST is applicable. Huh? Why GST is applicable? I'm only doing an audit, 1 lakh audit bill. Why that 5,000 rupees? The supply would include all the incidental expenditure also. Hence, it is applicable. Please collect GST on all reimbursement that you are making. Then there is a question from Vadivel. Sir, I am generating invoice in Tally Prime. Is that RCM applicable? Yes or no option is available? Yes, even in Tally Prime, whether when you are generating an invoice, whether the RCM is applicable or not, it is available. So one has to know how to do the configuration. In the good GST settings, you just need to, let's say, in the let me just alter one, sales item sales, there is a ledger. When you are setting the things, it would generally this much information is only visible. All that you should know, there is something called F12 additional configuration, which has to be exercised. You set all the details as yes, you will see. Now you will be able to see whether is reverse charge applicable or not is being highlighted. You can set it up. Once you do it, automatically it will print in the invoice and without collecting the tax. Hope this is clear. Okay. So now Kalyan is asking one next interesting question. Okay, I have asked a wrong example. What about government fees? As an auditor, we do incorporation of the companies. This fees which I have to pay. Simple example. I am filing GST return of yours. And you say that after computing ITC, everything, I said, sir, ये महीने का 11,000 liability भरना है. Client will say, आप भर दो, you pay the taxes, I will give you. Now, while I am sending the money invoice to him, along with my fees of 1 lakh, I should also collect that 11,000 rupees. And don't worry, that 1 lakh rupees also for filing and fees and audit. I've just taken a 1 lakh example, easy to understand. Now, how do I collect? How do I collect this 1 lakh? The question is, should it be part of tax invoice? Should it be a debit note, or can it be collected separately? The answer is, you got to first follow and prove that it is outside the scope of the supply. When I say outside the scope of supply, rule 33, pure agent. So I am actually doing a honorary job of paying taxes of yours to the government. So it is not my expenditure nor an income. Now, the travel reimbursement, you might say that it was not my expenditure, I have incurred for him. The slight difference, let's say I am a dealer of this instrument, let's say I am selling it for 1,000 rupees. This instrument I am selling it to you. Can I say I will, when I purchased, you gave me an order, against your order I have purchased, so this purchase cost I will eliminate? Answer is no. So anything I have an obligation to incur, even on your behalf, even for which you will reimburse to me, is still not a pure agent. Pure agent is very like pure. It is like no way impacting my P&L. Only then it will be treated as pure agent. When something which is not impacting the P&L, only that will be treated as pure agent. So it is very important. One has to understand that the items of the pure agent are very less. So now when this is not a pure agent, you pay tax. But what if it is a pure agent? You will collect it. Now the question is, can I show an item here as reimbursement? Answer is yes. Does it need a document? Not required. There's no statute requirement that it has to be in the document. You can put it in the tax invoice. You can issue a separate document. Should it be debit note? Answer is no. It's not a supply. It is not enhancement in supply. Definitely not debit note. Call it any name in any other document, no issue. Having mentioning in the invoice, will it impact my GST liability? Answer is no. Wherever it is a pure agent, there is no GST computation. That is where, if you see in the e-invoice schema, they have also given an additional collectible amount which doesn't suffer GST. So your addition to GST is happening a one line below the taxes, above the amounts to be collected. This how you will have to represent and establish that it is pure agent charges. Hope Kalyan, that answers your question. All right. Ashika, back to you. I think I have taken a lot of your time. Let me stop sharing this. Ashika? Yeah.
So, as we were discussing about tax invoice, a brief about what the format are. So, in tax invoice, if that invoice is for export, then there is additional condition which you need to comply in. Like if it is either it is export of goods or service, you have to specifically mention whether this export is with payment or without payment on your invoice. No, we are all know about the zero rated supply, where it is said that zero rated supply means export of goods or service outside India plus supplies to SEZ. So in both the cases, as we are doing, they have classified as zero rated. They have also given us two options. A person as per his suitability, an SSE can either opt for payment of tax or he can opt for payment without. So whatever the option you have availed for the purpose of zero rated supply, you have to mention it on the tax invoice. So this is also one of the content which is required by you to maintain in the tax invoice. As you are mentioning, party will be outside, so there will be no in case of export there will be no GST. However, in case of SEZ, obviously SEZ unit may be registered, so name and address and GST of the recipient you will specify. In case of outside, then name and address of the recipient, address of the delivery, and name of the country of the destination you have to specify on it. Now, with our tax invoice part is completed, now we will move to revise invoice. Under GST, they have specifically defined what are revise invoice. Now, over here, you need to have clarity. Revise invoice under GST does not mean that once you have issued an original invoice, suppose in original invoice you have done some error. After knowing about that error, you reissue that invoice. That does not mean it's a revised invoice. They have specifically under GST used revised invoice concept. So whenever any error happened in the tax invoice, you can't mention it as a revised invoice, because revised invoice have been given different meaning. So what is it? Let's look into it. As we all know, we are liable to take registration when we cross our turnover limit, aggregate turnover limit. Obviously, you have also an option to take voluntary registration. But when we apply for registration, and from the date registration is, we have been giving 30-day time limit to apply for registration. So as we are applying now, maybe we are applying for earlier dates. So when we are applying, obviously, as we are not registered at that time, the business which we have done during the time gap of applying and getting that registration certificate, that time gap, if you have done any business, you have raised any invoice, that invoice you will raise without GST. And after, once you have got your registration, then you have to issue a revised tax invoice. So at that time, after the getting the registration, when you will issue an invoice with GST to collect from your customer whom you have supplied when your registration was not there, for that concept, they have come with the revised tax invoice. So as we discussed, revised tax invoice also means tax invoice. So accordingly, on that basis, your recipient or counterparty will be eligible for ITC. Then comes our credit note. Now, credit note, it seems like we all are doing it. We know about credit note two types. Credit note, which where we get the benefit under GST, and another one is financial or commercial credit note, where we don't get the GST benefit. But before going into this credit and financial, let me take you through when you can issue a credit note. Most of the people don't know, and they, for writing off their liability written off or on account of non-receipt of money from their supplier, they issue a credit note and claim GST benefit. That is not allowed. You can issue a credit note under GST only three circumstances. These are, first thing, obviously, against that credit note, one tax invoice must be issued. Secondly, you can issue a credit note only when you have charged the value or tax which is more than what is payable. One case. Second case, where either maybe goods have been written or maybe deficient provision of service. Only in this three circumstances you can raise credit note. You can't raise credit note in case of bad debt. You can't raise credit note for any liability of your earlier period and write off and claim GST on it, benefit on it. So you need to keep in mind when you are raising credit note, it is in compliance to this three. Then only you will be eligible to the GST part of it. Otherwise, you won't be. On bad debt, your officer is not going to allow you the GST credit. He will straightforward disallow on the ground that as per the section, only in three conditions you are allowed. As we all know, there is a time limit for issuing of credit note. You can issue up to September month of the coming following financial year, or actual date of filing. Actual date of filing of annual return is more or less after the September only. So let us take the September month. GSTR 3B is your date of file issuance of credit note. So when you issue within this time limit only, then you are eligible to claim credit of it, and that is what we refer as credit note under GST. And when we issue after this time limit, we mention is as a financial or commercial credit note, as we won't be eligible for the GST paid on the same. For the eligibility of the credit, one more condition they have specified, that as we all know that as we raise an invoice of 1 lakh, charging GST at the rate of 18%, not 10,000 worth of goods get written. So on that 10, proportionate GST also I will raise. So I will raise a credit note of 10,000 plus 1,800 and will issue it to our recipient. When I issue my tax invoice, my recipient might have availed the credit on 1 lakh, GST charge 18%, 18,000 rupees. When I am issuing credit note, my recipient must reduce his ITC away of 18,000 by 1,800. If he does that, then only I am eligible to reduce my tax payable at the time of issuing the credit note. Now, another question which arises is how I can check on my recipient whether he has reduced it or not. The thing is that we have to make sure at the filing of GSTR1, at least we disclose that we have raised credit note and on that recipient. Under such circumstance, that recipient will be forced to reduce the credit. Even if he don't reduce the credit, at the time when the department audit will be done, it will be first on recipient to whether he has reduced it or not. Then only the department can come to you.
So one point which I would like to add here, Ashika, is again out of the experience in the department audits, department is going to prima facie start their verification from the books of accounts. So in the books of accounts, how you are recording this credit note is also very important. The common error which I have been noticing is the credit note is written in the expense side of the P&L on the sales credit note, and the purchase debit note is actually not the right word. The purchase written is shown as a sales side. And so in GSTR 3B, answer is no. In case of a sales written credit note, you got to reduce your liability and you cannot take it as an input tax credit. And you can't straight away make this adjustment in the annual return saying that it was netted off and I have shown it. No, you got to show your credit note. Table 9 of GSTR1 deals with the credit note. Please report all the credit notes. There is a time limit within which you have to issue. September, again, self-assessment. So you make your own call whether you are reporting within September or not. September of the next financial year. That's the last date within which you got to report.
Reporting is very important under GSTR1. If they don't find that you have reported under GSTR1, even though it is within time limit, they will disallow you the benefit of it due to non-reporting. Because as you have not reported, on that basis, your recipient may not have reduced the ITC on it. So because of that, they will straight away disallow. So whenever there is a credit note, make sure this time limit is not only for issuance, this time limit is also for reporting or reflecting the said transaction in GSTR1. Both need to be comply with it. Debit note. Obviously, like credit note, opposite is a debit note, where you have wrongly charged the tax or where the value should be more and you have charged less, then you will raise the debit note and accordingly you will dispose of your tax liability. Like for credit note, for taking the benefit, they have given the time limit, but for depositing extra tax, there is no time limit. As and when error is noticed, you do it maybe after 1 year, 1.5 years, 2 years, you do it and you deposit the tax amount. Now, debit note also includes supplementary invoices. Means debit and supplementary, the word they have used under GST are complementary to each other, means they go together. You can use the word debit note also or supplementary invoice also. Now, it's very important to understand when we are discussing invoice is when you have to raise tax invoice, when you have to raise revised tax invoice, when you have to raise debit note, when to credit note. Because every term they have specifically defined under GST and on that term only you have to do. Now, just for example, if you have done some error in your tax invoice, that error, depending upon on that error, it will depend whether you will raise credit note or debit note. One thing. Second thing, there may be the tax invoice properly raised, but while reporting in GSTR1, you have done the error. Now, due to reporting in GSTR1, you don't need to do anything in your documents, no credit or debit note. You just need to go to GSTR1 return and do the amendments. Amendment time limits is also next of the following year, September month. So you have to keep in mind what you are, when you are raising tax invoice, what is happening and when what documents to be raised. Most common error which we see in this type of thing is people don't know where the credit note or debit note is to be raised. It is very important to know that against your own supply only you can raise credit or debit note. For your supplier from whom you have made the purchases, again that purchases you can't raise credit and debit note. It is only against your own supply debit and credit note comes into picture, not against your counterparty. But most of the people do the error. Like just for an example, you have purchased a good worth rupees 1 lakh, taking the same way. Okay, 10,000 was not up to your mark, quality issue, whatever may be, you return that goods. Now your counterparty does not raise the credit note, which he should do. What the people are doing, they are raising the debit note. And that while raising that debit note, they are also reporting in GSTR1. That is not the correct way. It is your purchaser who has to raise the credit note. Because you can, as discussed, you can discuss against your own only. That is not your supply, so you can't raise debit note against that purchase. So what you should do in your books entry only, if you have raised credit, if you have returned the goods, you reduce your ITC availability. While filing your form GSTR 3B, you show where we get other reversal. Over there, table 4B, you show that over there, other reversal, this much of ITC you are reversing. Keep a proper record of that you have reversed is on account of being good return. Instead of raising a debit note and reporting in GSTR1. While reporting in GSTR1, you are increasing your sale, but that is actually not your sale. And you are indirectly increasing your turnover. With increase in turnover, they will ask you to pay the tax. These are the common error which we are seeing that people are doing, having no clarity between when credit and debit notes to be raised. So these terms, the way they have been explained on a GST, you need to be very much careful, and accordingly only you have to raise the invoice. Now, why we are saying all this thing is, one important thing, like as sir fully described, what are the elements to be mentioned in the invoice. If you will notice, when you will receive an audit notice from the department, how they will mention, give me outward supply detail with Hsn code. If you maintain your invoice in that pattern, whatever the accounting software you are using, if in that accounting software all these are mentioned, it will be very easy for you at the time when the department is asking for outward and inward supply detail to give it as per his direction. Otherwise, even though we have the sale detail, we will dump that sales purchase, put Hsn code ourselves, and then give it, unnecessary consuming time. So to save it, you can prior hand can take care of all this thing and maintain your accounts in such a way that whatever the detail asks, you don't need to redo or rework. Your accounting software do the same for you. Another important thing is advances. So for advances, as you all advances, they have been given two voucher to be issued. One is receipt voucher, one is refund voucher. Now they are saying whenever you receive the advance, you issue receipt voucher. And when you refund the advance, means where you have made no supply or no tax invoice has been issued, when you are refunding that amount, you raise the refund voucher. Now, why they have come up with this? That again, too, as we all know, when the payment is received, tax is payable, date of invoice or payment, whichever is earlier, as advances will be regarded as payment received in advance. So GST will be applicable. That's why they come up with the two voucher, receipt and refund voucher. Now in this, you need to keep in mind that on advances of goods, GST is not applicable. Only on advances of service, GST is applicable. Then whether we have to raise only in case of service and not in goods, the problem is that is not clarified. As per the rules, as per the section, the way they have determined, if you will see, they have nowhere mentioned taxable supply of goods or service or where tax is payable. So accordingly, refund and receipt have to be issued even in case of goods, though tax is not payable. So you want to add something?
The only point which is again from the documentation and record keeping is this advances received and adjusted is not actually tracked. So there is no respect given to GSTR1, your table 11, the advance details is not properly handled. 11A advance received, 11B advances adjusted. On a longer horizon, when I consolidate all my GSTR1s, my advance received and advance adjusted should be 0. This is something people have to follow. Owing to notification 66/2017 Central Tax, where the time of supply for advance for goods has been removed, but time of supply for advances for services is there. So you got to discharge the liability the moment you receive advance. That is where there is a concept of receipt voucher. So when I'm making a supply, there's a tax invoice. And when I'm receiving the money in advance, I will have to issue a receipt vouchers. These documents will actually ascertain the liability. Today, bookkeeping is everything automated. Your books of accounts have to be designed in such a way that these information is tracked. As good as a simple accounting software like Tally has a facility to track the tax liability on advances. So if you can start maintaining that in your books of accounts, because we don't prepare anything manually, so that is very important. Ashika, you're covering on the self-tax invoice separately, right? You're on mute, Ashika.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so please continue.
So as we discuss about the taxability, and in case of taxability, what are the invoice and voucher to be issued? Now coming to a non-taxable part. Non-taxable, when we say, does not only mean exempt, it also means your composition scheme for the purpose of this session. Okay, but non-taxable does not, as per GST Act, non-taxable does not include composition. Non-taxable exempt supply, as we say, it's include non-GST supply and exempted one. So whenever you are supplying exempted goods or service or non-taxable goods or service, and plus wherever you are under composition scheme, then you are required to issue bill of supply. Like for taxable, they have given tax invoice. For exempted and non-GST, they have given bill of supply. When we say bill of supply, obviously you can't collect tax from the recipient. So when you will be issuing this bill of supply, then there will be no tax component. In case of composition scheme, obviously they have given a minimized rate, reduced rate, which you have to pay out of your pockets. It's simply a gist of it. What we have studied in tax invoice, if we exclude all this thing, that name, address, GSTN of supplier, it should be also serial number. There should be date of issue. The person whom you are issuing may be registered or unregistered. If it is registered, you should specify the GSTN. Again, bill of supply should also be considered of Hsn code and description, and what should be the value of supply, and it should be signed. If you will see over here, there is no component of taxable goods. What should be the type of tax, what should be the rate, amount, nothing is there. Only value of supply is there. Now coming to the another part, which as we have finished off with our outwards.
One point I would like to add here in the earlier said bill of supply. Again, one common mistake which has been noticed during audits is, see, sometimes the people deal with taxable and exempt goods, and they're issuing a single document both for taxable and exempt goods. Under GST law, wherever you are making a taxable goods, you should issue tax invoice. Wherever you are making an exempt goods sale, you should issue bill of supply. You cannot merge both in single document. Let's say I am a provision shop dealer. You are buying some items for your office business purpose. You are buying from me a rice which is exempted, a sugar which is taxable. I am not supposed to merge both and issue a single document to you. That doesn't mean that every rate of tax should be in single thing. It 5%, 12%, 28%, different rates can be in single invoice, but taxable and exempt should not be in single invoice. Now you may say, is it practically possible, difficult, everything? That's the, you cannot question when the law is framed. The exemption is only given invoice cum bill of supply, rule 46A. It is only when a registered person is supplying both taxable as well as exempted goods or services to an unregistered person, then he can issue a single invoice cum bill of supply. This is the only thing which is given in the law. So if you are making two a registered person, you got to segregate taxable supply and exempted supply, issue tax invoice and bill of supply accordingly. Continue.
Inward supply. Now you would be thinking why we have taken inward supply. In inward supply, so there is no compliance. Being a person, why I would be liable to raise any documents in case of inward supply? I can understand outward supply. I am providing the service. I am manufacturing or trading the goods. And that case, compliance of document could be understood. But under GST, even for inward supply, they have specified few compliances. What are that compliances? That compliances come into picture in case of RC. There are by way of notification 30, they have specified the services on which as a recipient you are liable to pay GST on it, and by notification 4 for goods on which recipient is liable to pay tax. So for in case of inward supply, we are required to raise self-tax invoice and payment voucher. Two things you need to raise. So being a recipient, you have to raise, but sales tax invoice is not required if that you have received that service or goods from a registered person. If a person who is supplying to me is registered, then I am not required to raise the self-tax invoice. However, when I receive from unregistered, then I am liable. So it need to be understand that self-tax invoice is not in each and every case where RCM applicable. It is only where you have received it from unregistered. Now, when you have to raise on the date of receipt of goods or service. Unlike tax invoice, where there is a different time limit they have given for issuance of invoice. But in case of self-tax invoice, there is a different time limit. Obviously, in case of tax invoice, being a person supplier, you know when you are providing the service or when you are delivering the goods. But as a self-tax invoice, you can raise only on the date of receipt of goods or service. So accordingly, you have to raise the self-tax invoice. Now, why it is important? Input tax credit. ITC depend upon it under the RCM, because as per the conditions and eligibility of ITC, one of the important condition for availing ITC that you should be in possession of tax invoice, and self-tax invoice is also considered in the same, and they are saying you are eligible to claim ITC under RCM only when you have the self-tax invoice and subject to payment of tax. With this, you have to also raise payment voucher, but payment voucher is to be raised in each and every case. It's not the situation from registered or unregistered as we discussed in self-tax invoice. In case of payment voucher, you have to raise at each and every time, but only for RCM transaction, no other transaction. So whenever you make a payment for the transaction which is covered under RCM, you have to raise the payment voucher. This is the summary of RCM related document, what we have discussed. So if your supplier is registered, then you are not required to raise the self-tax invoice, but you are required to register issue the payment voucher. If your supplier is unregistered, then you have to raise the self-invoice and payment voucher both. They have given an option that you can raise, instead of raising one invoice every time on the basis of RCM, you can also raise consolidated self-tax invoice at the end of the month. Sir, you want to add on this?
The only point which is a reiteration is, we are paying taxes under self-tax invoice, reverse charge, and taking credit. Most of the people do not have a documentation for self-tax invoice. See, when we are paying under RCM, we are paying some liability. So there is a computation mechanism. saying that, okay, this is the amount. See, there are two types of my purchases for reverse charge. One is from a registered person and unregistered person. In case of a purchase being made from a registered person, the supplier is already issuing a document saying that, okay, tax is payable under reverse charge. So you know how much tax that needs to be paid. Then from unregistered purchases, which you are making both 9(3) or 9(4), you have to have a document which will say that so much amount has to be paid. Now, this is the document basis you are also availing input tax credit. So you are raising a document by yourself on yourself saying that these are all my purchases for which I am paying under reverse charge, Hsn, rate of tax, taxable value. These three are important because Hsn would also determine whether you are eligible for input tax credit or not. And rate of tax will determine the quantum of the tax that you need to discharge. So maintain one document every month, prepare one self-tax invoice. CGST, SGST put together one, IGST one. Sufficient. Prepare one document. In case if your accounting system is not permitting, say, let's say you're using software like a Tally, and you can create something called optional voucher. You just create a document which you can print it and keep it, but bring this discipline of self-tax invoice. Trust me, 90% of the people are not doing it. During the assessment, the officer says, okay, give me the copies of sample copies of self-tax invoice and show me the working, how you have arrived at reverse charge liability. At that point, people are trying to prepare, okay, how this has come. Can you give me your 9 and 9C working, how you have arrived at that liability? 9 and 9C is from your 3B. You cannot add anything more or less in your 9 what is not there in your 3B. So it is better you prepare a self-tax invoice document every month.
Then the last document which is there is ISD invoice. If you are registered under input service distributor, then you have to raise the invoice for the purpose of distribution. So what are the things which you have to specify is name, address, GSTN of the ISD. There should be serial number, date of issue, the GSTN to whom you are transferring the credit, that party detail, along with the credit to be distributed. Again, it need to be signed. Now, with this, we come to the end of the documents which we require to maintain. But why we discuss all this thing and what's the importance of this? Let us take you to one by one of this one. Okay. First one is the type of supply. Whenever we issue a tax invoice, you have seen that multiple things we mentioned. From the tax invoice, department is able to identify whether you have made a sale to a registered person or an unregistered person, whether it is like a taxable supply, it is an export, exempt, or what type of supply you have made. Because if it is an exempt, obviously you will be raising bill of supply. Taxable, then you will be raising tax invoice. So it's helped them to classify the transaction, the type of supply as a business, as the SSC is doing. Because as we know, export zero rated is what is linked with your refund. So whatever the details you are giving under export will help them to identify how much refund you are eligible. Exempt nil rated when we came. So in that, the ITC issue arose. Because if you are having a business where you are having both taxable and exempt, you are not eligible for 100% credit. Which is used for taxable, you are eligible for 100% credit. But which is a common input tax credit, on that you are proportionately required to reverse the credit. So the manner you raise your tax invoice and you maintain those records is very important. Your invoice, one of the things which we mentioned, whether RCM is applicable or not. If that is mentioned in your tax invoice, yes or no, and the pattern it is uploaded in GSTR1, that will help them to determine the liability of the person, whether it is a supplier who is liable to pay or it's a recipient who is liable to pay. One of the case where we are having this issue is like department has gone through GSTR 2A. While going through GSTR 2A, obviously he has seen there were some transaction where reverse charge was marked as yes. As it was marked as yes, he issued an audit observation asking us to pay the tax. When we go through that transaction, what we come to know is some of the transaction does not relate to me. Means some transaction, though showing in my GST, was not at all belongs to me. No, the party even didn't know that he has any transaction. Means no expenses were there in that name, even though that was appearing in GSTR 2A. And in one of the case, party was inadvertently has marked as RCM yes. Now, the thing is that now you go and explain it to the officer that we are not liable to pay RCM on this. Now you go with CA certificate, prove it to them that no transaction is there. To get a declaration from the person whom you don't know and who is showing, whose transaction are showing in GSTR 2A, you also think how you will know about it. How you will contact that person whose transaction are reflecting, with whom you have no correspondence. So it's very important, whatever the tax invoice detail you are preparing and how you are filling it in GSTR1 is in link with each other. So that, because see, for the department, GSTR1, 2A and 3B are their base of audit with your books of account. They reconcile the both, and whatever the differences they will notice, they will issue you a notice to explain those differences or either pay that taxes. As discussed, if it is a registered, obviously you will be mentioning GSTN. If it is unregistered, no GST, so it's a B2C supply. Classification of goods or services as one of the important content which is required to be mentioned in your invoice is the Hsn code or SSC code of goods or services with the description. So by way of your tax invoice, matching with the type of business you are doing, whether in goods or service, they will come to know whether you have properly classified it or not. Now the rate, obviously in invoice, one of the condition is rate and type of tax also to be mentioned. So whether if you are saying you deals in this Hsn code which is taxable at the rate of 5%, or you deals in this Hsn code which is taxable at the rate of 18%, there may be a dispute. That also will help the officers to check what you have specified in tax invoice and what in actuality what your business is. This is the one and foremost important for the invoice and document which we discuss is about input tax credit. It is on the basis of this document the counterparty is able to get the credit. Any error in all this document will result in denial of the credit. So whenever you raise tax invoice, you have to make sure it is properly in compliance so that no ITC is disallowed at the hand of the recipient. Obviously, proper record, proper everything, it will be regarded as a valid transaction. As we all know, lot of bogus transactions and all are going on. Scams, they are getting caught of it. So the manner you maintain your books of account, you maintain your documents, how you report in 1, 3B and GSTR 2B is very important to identify the genuineness of that transaction. Sir, you want to add something in this?
No, nothing. Nothing. We are good. Unless otherwise there are questions from the participants.
Now, this is not an exhaustive list. It's a few of the deficiency which we have noticed. Few we have already discussed also. Now, one of the important thing, like sir explained it to you about the e-invoicing. That's you have to issue e-invoice, and while issuing your e-invoice, QR code should be there with IRN embedded. Now, lots of have a question where what happened when non-generation of IRN ARN and e-invoice. So on this, I will like Sir to add on it, to explain.
So rule 48 sub rule 4 says that one has to issue a tax invoice, and the manner of issuing is given in rule 48. So in sub rule 4 it says that the invoice shall be prepared after obtaining IRN from the IRP in the common portal. The common portal which is notified is e-invoice INV1. And they say continue to further to say that wherever e-invoice is applicable, if the invoice is issued in any manner, that shall not be treated as an invoice. So there has been a question that is been coming up where if the supplier is liable to comply with the e-invoice and supplier has not complied with the e-invoice, will my input tax credit be is at risk? Now, very technically speaking, the words are such a way that it is not an invoice. However, in my view, when from the input tax credit perspective, you got to refer to rule 36 sub rule 2, which says a document which is issued containing this information. So who is the supplier? That's what we have seen, the supplier, recipient, GST, and all those things. If that is there, in my view, it suffices the compliance from the from availing input tax credit, and you should be good. Supplier would be penalized for non-generating e-invoice within the specified time.
Another other things we are finding that people are not mentioning place of supply in the invoice. So because of it, obviously sometime it happened, type of tax got changed. They should charge IGST. Instead of that, they have charged CNS. As already discussed, if you have charged and paid it to the government, then again you are required to pay the tax which is of correct type. If it was supposed to be IGST, you have to pay IGST again and claim the refund of CNS. Even e-way bill, non-mentioning of place of supply. While generating e-way bill, people are doing error. They are not properly specifying where the place of supply will be, where the delivery to be made. So causing problems like detention of goods and all. An address in the invoice, like if a person is registered with principal place of business at somewhere in Bangalore, after that there is change in his address, his principal place of business got changed. Now while raising the invoice, they are not changing the new address which they have to, with the change they have to do. They are not getting their GST registration amended. Because of that, officer is unnecessarily saying that in one of the issues happened, the place of business got changed. Due to change in address, the client has not updated in GST, not amended the registration certificate, and he was issuing the invoice with earlier address. Sorry, with the new address. So officer was like that, no, I will deal it, that you are doing supply, you are just issuing an invoice, bogus invoice without issuing the goods. So it's very important to see what's the address of your plus the address of your recipient. Because if a person is having multiple GSTN, there may be an error. You need to issue at Bihar, you issued at Odisha, giving the address of something else, giving the GSTN of something else. So while issuing your invoice, you need to be careful what your details should be and what your recipient details should be. Another thing, Hsn code. Now mentioning of Hsn code is mandatory from April 21. They have given specified mandatory limit. If your is up to 5 crore, you have to mention 4 digit, more than 5 crore, 6 digit. Further, your Hsn code and description of goods or service should match. There are issues are arising where the Hsn code and description are not matching, due to which the officers are saying that you have misclassified. They are trying to tax as a higher rate. Others we have already discussed, whether that non-mentioning about the RCM, whether tax is payable under RCM and not. Tax types and amount, like in case of zero rated supply, as we know it's an export. So it's an export, so why to mention the tax type and amount? It's export. If we are doing it without payment of tax, then not livable. No need to write. But as per the rules, you have to specify. So specify the tax amount, tax type. No problem. You write that it is an export without payment of tax. Similar is the situation with RCM. People are not properly mentioning in this self-tax invoice. Wrong GSTN, that's what we discussed about the multi-GSTN. So you need to be very careful about it. Now, this is one thing which we want to discuss is, it may happen a case that when the department you come to know about that this transaction is taxable. Now you talk to your recipient, you says that now department is asking for me tax, I will raise you for the tax amount, you pay it to me. Now, if you raise a debit note and try to collect tax, means you can collect tax from the recipient, but your recipient would not be eligible for input tax credit. And the debit note which you are raising, you have to specifically mention in that input tax credit is not admissible. This is one important part which is specified in Rule 53.3. So you need to be very careful. If after intervention of the department, you are trying to collect tax from your recipient or recover the tax, then you have to specifically mention that he won't be eligible for the input tax credit. Sir, you want to add something?
That's all from my side also. There's nothing unless otherwise there's questions from the participants.
Now, as we come to the part of our end, we discuss what's accounts record, document, what is the significance, what are the deficiency. Now, what will be the consequence? First and foremost, denial of input tax credit. If invoice is not properly issued, not reflected in 2B, even if reflecting with wrong detail, ITC will not be available. Invoice should be of 10 lakh, you reported 1 lakh. Recipient will be only eligible ITC to the extent of 1 lakh. As you all are aware, from January 2022, they have made mandatory that ITC is allowed only when the same is reflecting in your GSTR 2B. So it's very important when you are raising your invoice and reporting in GSTR 1, it is properly reflected in GSTR 2B with proper information, then only your counterparty will be eligible to claim ITC. Due to discrepancy, as we discussed, liability can be fastened on you. It can be due to any issues in the notice where tax invoice, bill of supply, whatever you have raised, assuming it to be exempted, they may raise a tax liability upon you. There are also penalty, registration certificate, and GSTN on the name of the board. It's very important. Wherever your place of business is there, you have to display your registration certificate. Otherwise, penalty of 50,000 is leviable. If you fail to obtain registration, 20,000. Where you have issued invoice but not supplied goods, or supplied goods but not invoice, then 20,000 or the tax amount, whichever is higher. Invoice signed by authorized signatory. In each and every document, wherever we discuss, the last point was it should be signed. It should be signed by authorized signatory. When we say it should be signed by authorized signatory, it should be signed by the one which you have given at the time of GST registration as authorized signatory. If it is not signed, then also there is a penalty of 20,000. Where you have collected the tax but not paid, again 20,000. Where you don't maintain the records, as we discussed, 50,000 penalties there. So this is, and obviously there is a general penalty of 20. Okay, this figure has got changed. General penalty of 50,000 again. If they don't find any of the error, but there is an error for which there is no specific penalty, they can impose a general penalty of 50,000. Sir, you want to add something?
No, nothing from my side.
So with this, we come to our end of GST session. If anybody have any query.
Any questions to the participants? Okay, no questions. We can continue to the session 2. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. This presentation would be anyhow shared, so you can always interact further after you get the, whenever you have, people generally get questions after we complete the session, then suddenly they will think of some point. Yeah, all right. So now let us move on to the session 2, part 2 of today's session, which is on textual things. Yeah, I see one question by Kalyan. If RO of company is being changed from one state to another, any amendment in registered office has changed, doesn't require any in that state. If you have closed down the operations and moving to a different state, you just need to file your the GST or the final 10 final return, and you have to close down. So there's nothing in the there is no concept of changing the registered office in GST certificate. The only thing that you can do in GST certificate is change your principal place of business. Let's say I am Apollo Pharmacy. I have around 500 pharmacies in the state of Karnataka. So one among that will be treated as a principal place of business. So I can change the principal place of business. Can we authorize signatory? Can we take authorized signatory letter from proprietor? You can for the purpose of the compliances, there can be multiple persons other than director, promoter, proprietor to comply with the law. So you can have authorize someone like my accountant Harini actually does the all the aspects. So her signature, her OTP, her email, everything happens in my IT return, in my GST records. Yeah. Okay. Now let's move to the second session. Second session, I have shared the practice file to everyone. Is the file with you? Can we start the session? Anyone do not have the file with you? Okay, let me share the screen. My screen is visible as usual question. And Azhar is always eager. Yes, is the first person to say. All right. I get it. Hope you all have this Excel, whatever the Excel which I have. You are seeing the same Excel and there are various information. Okay. So now let me start with discussing on the new functions that have come in Excel. In case if you want to work parallelly with me, please work. This session is being recorded. You will have the copy of the recording with you. Okay. Now, if you are using older version of Microsoft Excel, all the thing which I'm showing will not be working in your system. It is like good to know. If you are using a pirated Excel, it might not work. If you are using Microsoft Office 2016 and above, it will work because I am also using that version. Office 365, it will work. So if you are using the latest versions of the Excel, whatever we are discussing will work. Now, the first and foremost thing is I have some 5 names here. I have 5 names here. I want to actually split the names. In a normal course, there are only 2 ways of doing it. People will do, okay, select this, Control C, Control V and do it. Or they will try to take this and text to columns. So Alt DE, they will try to put it. But is there any pattern in my data? Answer is no. Because I have a dot, I have a space, I have a comma. So it's difficult to use the multiple delimiters also. The new function, new Microsoft Excel function that has come is text split. So you are splitting the text, you are splitting the text and you are splitting the text. So the function is, let me zoom this. Just in case if it's not visible. Yeah. Okay. Is equal to text split. So this is the text. This is the text. You want to split it. You want to split. And the delimiter, let's say space. How do I give? In my double quotes, I give a space and close. Now you can automatically see the data got split. Can you see automatically the data got split? But here you can see here this Gella comma partner is together. Gella comma partner is together. So you want to use multiple splits possible. So let me use the formula also. So you can see the formula. Whatever the formula I'm writing will be visible to you here. So now I will be adding one more parameter. Instead of merely saying I can use double quotes and open parenthesis and use one thing, there is a dot, then there is a comma. I can use all that within the thing. And do you want to have anything row delimiter, like you want to put it to row? That's also possible. I'll show in a while. And ignore empty, other things I'll come in a while. So now you can see CA, you find a dot, you find a space, you can now see something else has come. This is where the ignore empty comes in. If you want to ignore an empty cells, you set it as true, that ignore empty, you set it as true, then you will not find the gap in between, and wherever the gap is there, the empty cells are ignored. This is one very good function which can easily split the text into the with different parameters. Now you can see here clearly that I have used one parameter as a space, another parameter as a dot, another parameter as comma. Any doubts to anyone? Can we move to the next function? Next variant of text split. Yes, no, maybe. Am I muted? Is this clear? Can we move to the next function? So I would request you to keep putting yes, 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 yes every time when I ask. So that gives me a motivation that, okay, other side and we both are on the same page. All right. It's not that data has to go this way. Data can come in this way also. Is equal to text split. I always copy the formula so that you can understand what I am doing. Is equal to text split. Now this is the text. The column delimiter, I'm not giving anything. I want a row delimiter. So I'm putting a comma and my row delimiter is my comma. Now look at this. Look what has happened. The data has come in April, May, June, July in this fashion. So the data has come in this fashion, April, May, June, July. Yeah, you get it? So this was the first one was column delimiter. This was my row delimiter. Now let me merge the column and row delimiter. Let me merge the showing the column and the row delimiter. So what is there? I have my I want to split in the columns. I want to split this data in the columns. There's a is equal to, and every time when you find a comma, you go to the next line. Pretty impressive, right? So this is the data, and this data got translated into this format. Is that clear? Can I move to the next function? Only two, yes. Other people trying, seeing, got it. All right. Now, here I want to split, sort, and stitch it back. So basically, there are multiple names. I want the names in a single order. I want the names in a single order. I want the names to be in a very single order. Now, how do I do it? How do I do it? There's a function called text join. By the way, pretty important function. Let me show the text join. Let's say I'll copy this information, April, May, June. I've copied it. So I copied the April, May, June here. So there is something called how you have text split, text join. So you want to join with what is the delimiter? How do you want to join? I want to join by way of comma. I want to join by way of comma. And if there are empty, you can ignore the empty cells. And where is your text? Here is my text. So I can also join the text. I can split the text, right? So here the requirement is I want to split the text, sort it in one order, and join it back. Let's do them one by one. How do I split? It's pretty simple. Is equal to text split this using comma. All right. And there's a sort function is equal to sort you can sort the data. This is the sort the data. You have the data which needs to be sorted. I don't know, suddenly my system became extremely slow. Let me close some applications. So your sort index, you can actually give multiple order, ascending, descending. You can set it, and you want to sort it by columns or by rows. You can set that, and now you can see the data got sorted in one order. After that, what is the objective? I want to stitch it back, which is text join. Text join with comma. And if there is empty, ignore the empty cells. And where is my text? Basically, I can put D23 and hash. So it will automatically take whatever the data that is there after that. So you can see this is the original data. Basically, this was the original. Let me cut this and put it. So this was the original data. We had split the data, sorted the data. So we first did the split, then sort, then we did a join. We joined the data back. By the way, if you, for some of you it looks very basic, for some of you it is very advanced. We have a video recording. You will be shared with the YouTube video. You can always work back. If I have to put everything in one go, like this is your split command. Sorry, this is your split command, right? So you can, this was my split command. Now I have to sort the data. I have to sort the data. So in the sorting, I can actually apply the sort here, and my split command, instead of the array, I have put the, so it got split, and I want to join, right? So the text join. So I will put my text join command. So the array which I want to join, is this portion. So all that I'll do is I'll just put a bracket to this data. Yeah. So in one go, you have achieved this objective of splitting it, sorting it, and joining back. For some of you, again, hi-fi, some of you, wherever. Is this clear? Have you understood this? Can we move to the next one? All right. So here comes the next one, text to columns. So I have some team members here. I have some team members list here, and I want all the data into my columns. I want everything in single column. So there's a function called, two columns, TOCOL and you can give the array. And sometimes you might have values missing, you might have data blanks, everything. You want to keep blanks, you want to ignore blanks, you can set everything. Right now I want to keep all the values, and you want it to be sorted in the order of row or in the order of the column. So default is the order of the row, it gets sorted, and I am closing. Boom, you are here. So it has default is row. Default is row, which means it has taken Harini, Kirti, Anil in one, then started with Kirtana, Kritika, Jagdish, Anjali. So the entire matrix has come into the one go. You can set the default as a row instead of column. Instead of row, you can set it to column. Now you will see first the four you have got Harini, Kirtana, Shailaja, Manju. Then you got Kirti, Kritika, Ganesh. So everything has been brought into one place. Many times when we are working, we might get the data in multiple goes. We might have to do this data, bringing everything to one place. So the function which we have used, so it is to column, whatever is the array, and whether you want to sort it, get it by columns or rows, whatever the manner you got it. Is this clear? Can we move to the next function? Anyone not understanding, by the way, just keep asking me, don't worry. Okay. And if you think that I am slow, please mention it so I can be speed also. All right, now let's go to rows. It's pretty simple, straight. Whatever we did, two columns, instead of having it in a columnar vertical, I will become horizontal. So it is two row. You will give the array, whatever is the array you want, and you want to keep all the values. You can keep all the values, and by default sort it by row, set it even if you don't give. So this is the formula. Yeah, two row. Now, given that we have seen so much formulas, I'll have to show you there's a file like this where we had worked in a bank audit very recently, where the data is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 rows. I think each row has some 30 columns, and this is one record. Second record is here. We wanted to get it into a single record. So how did we do it? So here is the data. You can copy this data. All right. So I was trying for your sake. So here is the data which I've copied. Now you can see the data is into multiple places, multiple location, all the way. And I wanted to have the data into one single thing. So easiest way to do it, first you have 6 records. You join all the 6 records. Text join. You do a text join. You do this. So data is join. You are joining with the text. And once the data is joined, so all the data, you can see data is joined. It is into a single line. This now you can apply the text split. So I'll put the formula for the ease of people. So I'll put the formula. So now I'm splitting the data. So text split, this is the text and your delimiter, your column delimiter. Sometimes I have a pipe, sometimes I have a pipe, or it is a pipe with space. In both the cases, I want to treat it as one. Nothing is a row delimiter. And do you want to ignore empty cells at this point? Yes. And I am closing the bracket. Here we go. We got all the data. Let's say I don't want to ignore empty. Let me put it as false. Yeah. So you have all the data with you. And there is a question mark also as a delimiter. So you can add one more delimiter, which is question mark. Yeah. So you have all the data that you think which is required, which is here. Now this I just need to copy. So for record one, I have all the information that is required for the first record. I have the details with me. So this way, if I just copy this information and I was just showing you for the ease, but there's, so you can see all the details, name, whatever, the product code, all the information is something which automatically in one go, something which is complicated as this has become pretty simple in life, right? So this is the advantage of knowing the formulas. So we have done with text to rows and to columns. Now comes text after. Now comes text after. Dheeraj is asking that I have 365 version, but still not working these functions. Dheeraj, you just go whether is your Office 365 updated. Just update the thing. This should work. These are the functions which was there quite some time. So just check with the thing. All right. Now text after. What does the text after and before? Basically, this is eliminating left, mid, right, all those things are getting eliminated. Earlier, we want to have a data. So let me give. So I want to have the data, whatever is the text, which is, this is the text. I want the text which is there after the space. So you can see you got the text which is there after the space. Here there is no space. So whenever you encounter errors, if error, so you do not have space, so you can get the same thing. Now you may say, I want the text after the second instance. You can always say, okay, you want the second instance, you give it as 2. Now you can see you got the data after the second instance. By the way, I should apply this. If there is any error, you pick this. So by this way, you don't need to, earlier the way people used to work is copy the space, search the space, find the position of the space, get the length, apply the length function, mid function, left function, using the position, like the way people used to work is I used to search find the text. I want to find the space here. So I want to find the space here, and starting from 1 I used to give, okay, it is in 7th position. So people have to now do guesswork, the second instance, third instance. So that's how they used to do multiple things. Now pretty simple. The text after and text before is the same method of it. So I am saying left side. So text before, I want the text which is before the space. That's it. So by default is first instance. So I want my second instance. I want after 2 spaces, whatever is the name, get me that name. So that's how the text after and the text before works. The text after and text before works. Sometimes you have multiple things. You want to pick dot. Like even here, it's not just necessary space. You can open your curly bracket and you can say sometimes it might be dot, sometimes it might be comma, whatever it is, consider all and give. You can see here. So you can give multiple arguments to pick a text which is before. So I have taken 3 instances, comma, dot, and the space. So anything 3 occurrences of it has taken, and items before that it has given. So this is how you work on text before and text after. Any doubts to anyone on text before and text after? This file will be shared with you. Absolutely, you can practice it later, just in case if for some of you this is not working in your system at this point, you want to work later, you will get this file. Shall we proceed? Is it too boring? Are you following? Am I clear? All right. All right. So now let's go to the next function on the textual thing is stacking of the data. Next function is stacking of the data. I have the teams, and so there's accounts department, tax department, GST department, and say RERA department. So there are multiple departments. Everything is in different places. So I want to get it into a proper way. I want to stack it, organize it, align it properly. So basically employee name, employee or salary, right? So I want to give this. So the formula that you need to use, second switch. Yeah, thank you. We stack. So vertically you are stacking it. This is one array. This is your second array. This is your third array, and this is your fourth array. Done. All the data you have which is required is there with you. All the data that you need to get is with you. Employee name and employee salary. And The beauty of it is this is, by the way, these are all an expandable functions. Today with the Excel, everything, if by mistake, assuming if I have something here, then it says some spill, it is unable to expand. It cannot give anything. It is not free for me to share the information. The moment I do this, it has automatically got the data. So if you are here, technically there is the you can see it is graded, but when I come here, it is in black, which means it is borrowing the source from elsewhere. That's how the new data functions work today. Now, beauty of it is, if this is a table, right? Let's say if this is my accounts, if this is my accounts, let me make it as table. Control T is a table. I will say this as so I will call this as accounts data. Now here, instead of selecting this, I will select accounts data. Now look at what happens. The advantage, please pay attention here. After Manju, the Kirti is there. I have not hard coded. So now if I write after this, let me write Umesh and 33,000. You can see data has come automatically. Data has come Ravi 25,000. But when I do the same thing here, after between Venu, Ganesh, Venu, Nalini should come, but Ganesh, Venu, Anil has come. This is missing when this was not into a text table format. So when you use it in a table, this is automatically expanding. The scope gets expanded. Start using, whenever you are using Excel, data in tabular format and name manager. This way you are making the data also dynamic. You are making it as dynamic. So with the increase in the data, your data gets added. This is your vertical stack. Any doubts to anyone? All right. Now let's move to horizontal stacking. Quite opposite of this. So I just need to say H stack is this data. This data, tax data, GST data, and RERA data. So it has automatically stacked the details in one place. Generally, you need to be aware of this. Where it will be useful, you'll automatically get to know when I start doing, when we wrap the rows and the last function of dropping something, you'll get to know this. So this is on VStack and HStacks. Now let's wrap the rows. So let's say this is the Venu Anil, and I have salaries or turnover of both the people in multiple periods. In multiple periods, I have the data. Now, I'm not sure how many of you noticed in the earlier functions, there is something called padding. Every time I ignored, let me explain it. So a new function, wrap columns and wrap rows. Right now I'm wrapping the data into rows. So here is my wrap rows. So here is my data. I can either do this way or I can put it as C2 hash. So that it will take the data, whatever it is next to it. And wrap count, I'm saying 2, every 2 columns I want it. Wherever the data is paired with, so you want to pad, you want to, okay, sorry. Wherever you want to pad with, you can do the missing values. Yeah, so you can so you can automatically see this data has now come in, which was there in this. After every 2 columns, it had jumped, it has started wrapping it into a separate place. So you have whole of this data, you have wrapped it more like a pivot tables. Most of the times pivot tables will not be helpful when you're working, want a count of the numbers, sum of the numbers. That is the data that would be helpful when you are wrapping the rows. Likewise, you might have, you can wrap it into columns also. You can wrap it, the data into columns. Like, let's say this is the same data. Okay, let's wrap columns. So this is the same data. Let's say this is April, May, June. Okay, so I will wrap this data instead of rows. Here is my vector and put it into columns. Even if you don't give also, nothing will happen. So you can say now you can see this is April, May, June. So if your data is in this fashion, automatically you are wrapping the data in any fashion. So you, after every line, you want, after every 3 lines you want to bring down, or every 3 lines you want to bring it into separate column. Choice is yours. You can do it. Like if I say artificially, let me introduce one more thing. I'll say Vinay, and I will start with B, and so look at this, how this data has come. Automatically you can see this is for 1 month, this is 2nd month. So data has automatically became into 3 columns. So you can wrap the data however you want. And basically this is what, now you can see a huge list. You will not be able to see it. So you can wrap and put it. That's what they have done it. They have wrapped it and given. You want, you can stitch it back. You can do whatever the functions you would want to do it. So this is how we have wrapped rows and wrapped the columns. In a normal course, what is the way out? All that I can do is I will do Control C, come here, Control V. No, then you will say, no, I don't want this way, I want in vertical way. Then you will say, okay, it is not Control V, it is space special. You will say transpose, and you will keep doing, coming everything every now and then the data. So you have to do this way. If it is one time, okay, but every time large set of data and chance of errors always happens. But now it is like system is doing it. System is doing it for you automatically. Yeah. Is this clear to you guys? Nidhi, you are asking to Zoom. Let me put the formula. This is the formula. Anyhow, we'll be sharing you the file. So Nidhi, is this visible, clear? Anyone, any doubts? All right. Now let's go to we are almost coming to the end. I know patient levels come down as we move to the end. Okay. So I have this set of data. Now there's something called, when you have a table, you have an option to take few. You can take only few information. So someone says, okay, I want first 5 records, I want second 5 records, right? So something like that. So let's say, okay, let's say first 5 records. How do I take it? The way you will do is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, copy, apply filter, something like that, right? Simple. The function called take. Your function called take. So rows, columns, you can drop anything. So this is the array. This is the array. And how many rows you want? I want, say, first 5 rows. Yeah. So done. You have your first 5 rows details with you. And by the way, these are dynamic. I can put it as 5 here. And instead of 5, I am saying link this number. So I say 8 rows. So you can see the information automatically coming up, right? You may also say, so there, instead of random, can we take some filtered data? You know, given that this filter is that commonly used filter is top 10 records. Yeah, that's how we apply the filters and take it, right? And in one of the earlier function, we have looked at something called sort. That's what we have learned. Let's apply that sort here. So instead of taking B2, let me just give the formula here. This is the formula which is there. So now what I am doing, I am applying a sort function to this. So I am saying you sort this data. Sort B4 to H5, and the sort index, you want to sort ascending, descending, you can set it. Let's say I want the salary in a decreasing order, I'll put it as descending, and you want to sort it by 3rd column, right? So I said the sort by 3rd column. Yeah, so oh, sorry. Yeah. Yeah. So the comma is always very important. So there was just one comma that came up, then the whole thing messed up. So what I have done is I have sorted, and let's say we wanted to take top 10 records, 8 records, whatever. So 8 people whose salary in the order of salary we have given. Anil is showing 48,800. I don't know where. Yeah, Anil is here. Instead of 4,800, Vinay is 48,000. I'm making this as 46,000. Look at this. Automatically the order got changed. 26,000. Maybe this will be out and something else will come in. So this is how the advantage of you in a normal course, what you will have to do, you will be applying a filter and you will be going here, you will sort largest to smallest, number filter, top 10 are above 40,000, all those things that you have set it here. You can apply a filter. By the way, I'll explain you in the next function with the filter thing also. So now you can couple multiple spill functions in one function itself. Yeah. So we are now taking few records from a data set. Now this, if this is a table, if this is your, like you can set this, sorry, you can set this as employee DB. And I am just saying, instead of this thing, I'll say employee database. So sort employee database from the third column in the descending and give me the number of records. Here I can say record count, and how many records you want, you will come by. So the moment you give it in a natural English, you are getting it. So record count, if you want 15 records, you get 15 records. You want 2 records, top 2 records, you got it. Yeah. So this is how the interpretation manipulation with the data works. Clear? Any doubts to anyone? We are almost, I think, coming to end. I think we have, oh no, yeah, we have 4 more functions. Can I proceed to the next one? Yes, no, maybe. Any doubts to anyone? All right. Now comes drop few. Yeah. So how you have a take function where you can take some data. There is something called drop. There's something called drop. What does drop means? Let me just zoom this. So same thing, opposite of take. So drop. So you can drop 3 rows. And it has dropped the 3 rows. Harini, Kirtana, Shailaja has been dropped, and from Manju you got it. Assuming you want to drop the bottom 3 rows, like Anjali, Vinay, Venu needs to be dropped, you can say -3. You will see Harini, Kirtana, everything here, and this Anjali, Vinay, Venu got dropped here, right? So this is how your drop and take function works. You can drop some data, you can take some data, which will help you in picking. And this, you can always put it in a function. By the way, Excel is an enabler in your audits and your financial function. Do not think that you have Excel function, which means you are master in your audit or the things. While applying doing the audits, you will get that, how do I take this? What do I do this? That's where these formulas come into handy. The next thing is choose columns. Like you have so much of the data, you want to choose few information. So that's where you can use the function called choose columns and rows. So I can say, again, let's do. So choose columns. This is my data set, and I can choose what column you want. Let's say I want employee name and the salary. Employee name is your second column, salary is your third column. Done. So employee name and salary has come out of the so much data. or I just want the, though it doesn't make sense, and accounts department. Can you see the order also got changed? And I can actually drop. Now Harini belongs to accounts, Kritika belongs to tax. So now you can, you are now, it is now you are getting a different interpretation of the data, right? Otherwise, earlier, if you have to do this, you have to Alt-W, insert a new sheet, Control-C, Control-V, VLOOKUP, and all those things. Now, VLOOKUP is pretty simple. It is automatically, you can apply a VLOOKUP to this data. Of course, now XLOOKUP has come to help us in putting it in this way. So, you, without touching the original data, you have now prepared your reports however you want. Likewise, choose rows. So you can say choose rows. This is the rows you want 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, you have your rows with you. You have your 5 rows with you, right? And this is where I have said that every time when I actually teach, I also try to teach some new coupled formulas also. So you can apply a filter. You know, there's something called filter. You can apply a filter, and where the salary is more than that, you can apply that and take it. Yeah. Now, if you want to choose your salary more than 20,000, you want to choose your salary which is more than 20,000, and you want to, let's say, 3 rows that you want to pick, 1, 2, 3, where the salary is more than 20,000. So in your choose rows, which we already have, I can apply one more thing called, so right now it is formula. So this is the formula which we have, choose rows. So now I will say choose rows. Instead of giving the array, let me create a filtered array. The formula you have, there's something called filter, and this is the array. And what do you want to filter is include if this value is greater than 20,000, value greater than 20,000, and if empty you can ignore. Right now we don't have any empty, so your array is done. So you want first column, second column, third column, fourth column, fifth column. Now you see, look at the results. Okay, I haven't sorted. Oh, it's 2,000. Let's make it as 20,000. Yeah. So now you can see there's a different result automatically coming. So this, we have, you chosen the same data. Data was to choose the same thing, but now you have applied a filter. The first 5 rows wherever 20,000 has exceeded. By the way, I haven't sorted, so it started looking here 20,000 exceeded, here exceeded, here exceeded, here exceeded. So it has picked Harini, Kirti, Kritika, so Manju. These people have been picked. Yeah. So clear everyone, choose column and choose rows. Let's go to the last one, which is expand. The last one, which is expand. So whenever we want to use vertical stack or horizontal stack, the data needs to be in a unique way. The data has to be unique way. So if the data is not in a unique way and you want to add the data, so you will have the spillover functions will not work. So whenever the data is not in unique, you can actually add the additional rows by using the function called expand. Let's say here I have two sets of data. I have this data and I have the another. So I have, these are new employees that have come. Now I want to add to this list. I want to add the employees to this list. So let's say name, salary, and department. Okay. So you can always choose. So the way I wanted here is I want the name first, salary next, and department. Okay. So this is the new data. This is the existing data. So now can I stack? Let's see. Stack. Can I stack it? I'll say vertically stack this data and this data. So now you can see automatically this something is missing because data is not there. So but you can actually expand it. So you can expand this. You don't need to expand the rows, but you want to make it into 3 columns. And the missing data, if anything is missing, you will say department missing. You padded it. So now you have 3 details. Now you can vertically stack both. This is one array and this is the second array. Now you will not get any error. So this way you have expanded the database and you are doing a horizontal or vertical stacking of the details. So with this, it has no, in my Excel, this is the last. There are no more details. I think even in your Excel, this is the last. There are no more details. We can now conclude the session. I am not sure. It's like other side how it is, whether it was exciting and new thing, or this is something I know, or you're frustrating, it's not working in my system, or you may say I was too speed, or for some you, oh, this is the information I know. Whatever be the state, I think we have mix of the people, but the objective is to, you have to learn something, some function all the times. You got to really master your skills in data manipulation. That's the objective of our sessions. I don't believe in terms of learning everything overnight. It has to come by its own time and it has to come by practice. So between now to the next session, you can master yourself in all these functions, and in the next session again we will come up with some new formulae and new things. Right. With this, we have come to end of the session. Value to text function in any of the session? Yes, Kalyan will take it up. Okay. Any other questions for anyone? Don't worry. This file I will be sharing with you all. So in fact, let me do it now. Otherwise, you might also forget. And by the way, you will definitely get email again with this file. So for participants practice, I have shared the file in the group. You can download and you can use it. Yeah. All right. Okay. Hope this is informative. And with this, we have come to end of today's session. See you again in the next session. I'm here for by a couple of minutes in case if you have any doubts, both on the Excel and the GST, so we can discuss. Otherwise, thank you and goodbye. Thank you. Thank you, Monica, Kalyan, Jeffy, Shilpa, Nidhi. Thank you. Got that. You have learned something. All right. Let's